Next, Mr. Chameleon and the case of the conceited murderer. Tonight we again present the famous Mr. Chameleon of Central Headquarters in his most famous cases of crime and murder, brought to you by the makers of genuine Bayer aspirin. Mr. Chameleon, as you all know, is the famous and dreaded detective of Central Police Headquarters who frequently uses a disguise or impersonation to confuse the criminals he is tracking down. In tonight's case, he appears in a particularly interesting disguise, which the audience will at all times recognize. Tonight we give you Mr. Chameleon in the case of the conceited murderer. A great photographer can be as much an artist as a portrait painter. And Francis Mayhew, without doubt, is a great photographer. But as a man and a husband, he has his shortcomings. And we find him now in his studio, listening impatiently as his wife Agnes says to him,
"Francis, I can't stand it. I've had all I can take. If your appointment this afternoon is with one of your girls, those poor little girls that you flatter and betray..."
Oh, shut up, Agnes. I'm fed up, too. And get out of the studio. It's nearly 3 o'clock.
First tell me who's coming at 3 o'clock. There's something wrong about it. Something evil. I can tell.
You don't say. Don't tell me you're getting psychic in your old age, darling.
Francis, I'm warning you. I'm desperate.
That's too bad. Now, don't make me ask you again to get out of my studio. At 3 o'clock sharp, I'm taking somebody's photograph. The most interesting portrait I've ever done, and I'm not going to let you spoil my fun with your nagging. Now, get out.
Yes, Francis.
And send in Henry Marble, the building superintendent.
Yes, I will.
Did you want me, Mr. Mayhew?
Yes, Henry. At 3 o'clock, I'm locking the door of this studio, and no one is to disturb me. Understand?
Yes, sir.
If they ring your bell when mine doesn't answer, tell them I'm gone for the day. I have a 3 o'clock appointment, Henry, that I wouldn't miss for the world. It's the most amusing and the most exciting thing that's ever happened to me.
But less than 3 hours later, at 5:30, a frantic phone call has come through to Central Police Headquarters. And we find Mr. Chameleon, the famous detective, talking to the Commissioner of Police, who is saying,
"Ever hear of Francis Mayhew, Chameleon?"
Oh, who hasn't, Commissioner? One of the greatest photographers the world's ever known. To be photographed by him means that you've definitely arrived.
Ever meet him?
No, Commissioner, and maybe it's just as well. I admired his work so much, but I hear the man is a so-and-so. Don't tell me that he's killed someone.
Someone's killed him.
What?
Yes, the superintendent of the building where he has his studio found him stabbed to death and then called the police. Now get up there, Chameleon. It's in your hands. You better take Detective Sergeant Dave Arnold with you.
And a few minutes later, in Mayhew's studio, Mr. Chameleon and Dave Arnold are bending over Mayhew's body, and Chameleon is saying,
A lot of hatred went into this killing, Dave. Look at the stab wounds in Mayhew's chest, shoulders, and face.
And the busted camera, Mr. Chameleon.
With the plates removed and smashed. From the position of his body, I'd say Mr. Mayhew was just about to take someone's photograph.
The murderer's photograph?
Maybe and maybe not. Where is that superintendent? Oh, here you are. How did you happen to find the body, Mr.
Marble, Henry Marble is my name. Mr. Mayhew gave me orders that he mustn't be disturbed between 3 o'clock and 5 this afternoon.
Why?
Well, I don't know, sir, Mr. Chameleon, except it was important, and he laughed a lot over it.
Mr. Mayhew laughed?
Yes, sir, kind of chuckled, and got that crazy look in his eye he got sometimes. But a telegram came, and at 5 o'clock, I knocked on the studio door, and when he didn't answer, I walked in. He was lying right there. It was awful.
What's beyond the studio?
The reception room, sir.
Occupied right now by Mrs. Mayhew and a man named Carl Rich. I knew you'd want to question them, Mr. Chameleon.
Yes, Dave. Who is Carl Rich, Henry?
Mr. Mayhew's assistants helped him with the developing of the pictures, things like that.
I see. All right, Henry, thank you very much. I hear that you have a flat downstairs. I'll call you if I need you.
Yes,
sir. Dave, you get Mrs. Mayhew, please?
Okay, Mr. Chameleon. Mrs. Mayhew, will you come in, please?
How do you do, Mrs. Mayhew? I'm Chameleon of Central Police Headquarters. You've seen your husband's body?
Yes, it's horrible.
I agree. You seem very composed.
You have a sharp eye, Mr. Chameleon. As sharp as my husband's. I won't lie to you. Francis and I had been estranged for years.
Why? Remember, Mrs. Mayhew, your husband was murdered. Now, I must ask a great many questions that you won't like. Why were you and your husband estranged?
Other women, mostly.
I understand that he had a mysterious appointment here in his studio at 3 o'clock. Did you believe, Mrs. Mayhew, that some girl was involved?
Yes, Mr. Chameleon. And it seems so hideous after what happened to Joyce Arnold.
Joyce Arnold? Wait a minute. Wasn't she the beautiful model who killed herself a few weeks ago?
When my husband was through with her. Yes, that's right.
How did your husband know this girl?
Well,
Please answer me, Mrs. Mayhew.
Joyce was the sweetheart of Carl Rich, my husband's assistant.
Do you mean that your husband took this girl away from Carl Rich and the girl later killed herself, yet Rich went on working with him?
I can't understand that either, Mr. Chameleon.
Where is Carl Rich?
In the little bedroom off the reception room. My husband has often stayed here for weeks at a time.
Wait in the reception room for me, Mrs. Mayhew, till I finish with Mr. Rich. I want to question him right now. Mr. Rich, I'm Chameleon of Central Police Headquarters.
You don't say. Am I supposed to shake in my boots?
Possibly, if you're guilty of murdering your employer.
What? Are you accusing me of murdering Mayhew? I wasn't near this studio between 3 and 5 o'clock this afternoon.
The mysterious 3 o'clock appointment again. Who do you think had that appointment with Mayhew, Mr. Rich?
I have no idea, Mr. Chameleon. But I know he acted darn queer about it. Gave me strict orders not to come around.
So what'd you do?
Are you asking me for an alibi?
I am, Mr. Rich. What were you doing between 3 and 5 this afternoon, the time when Mayhew was murdered in the studio?
Why, I was doing a little shopping. I was alone.
That is not so good.
Now listen, Mr. Chameleon.
No, you listen, Mr. Rich. I understand Francis Mayhew stole your girlfriend away from you, Joyce Arnold.
So his wife told you, did she? Agnes told you.
Not only that, the poor girl, Joyce Arnold, committed suicide over Mayhew. Yet you stayed on here working for Mayhew. A very unnatural thing to do. Unless you were waiting your chance to take revenge on him.
If I was, someone beat me to it. I didn't kill him. And Agnes was covering up for herself.
What do you mean?
She didn't tell you about Martin Drake, did she, Mr. Chameleon? No, I'll bet she didn't.
Who's Martin Drake?
The man Agnes loves and wants to marry. But Mayhew wouldn't give her a divorce. He said he'd fight it just out of pure cussedness. Agnes was desperate, and so was Drake. Desperate enough to...
Why, you dirty skunk. Can't you defend yourself without dragging us into it?
Mr. Drake.
I ought to break your neck.
You won't touch him, Mr. Drake.
Try and stop me.
You want to be arrested for assault? Is that going to help you and the woman you love?
No.
All right, then. Mr. Rich, you may go. I warn you, don't try to leave town. You won't have a chance.
Okay, Mr. Chameleon. But ask Drake for an alibi, why don't you?
I intend to. Well, Mr. Drake?
I have no alibi, Mr. Chameleon. Between 3 and 5 this afternoon, I was out doing some shopping.
Yeah. Shops did a rushing business today. Where were you when you overheard Carl Rich just now?
In the reception room with Agnes Mayhew.
You really love her?
Yes. And I want to marry her, and I hated her husband. But that doesn't mean I'd murder him.
Why did you hate Mayhew, Mr. Drake? Solely because of his treatment of his wife, whom you love?
Isn't that enough? You don't know what she put up with, Mr. Chameleon. Not just other women, but the way he acted in their home. Insulting her by bringing home all those terrible people.
What terrible people?
Drunken bums, gangsters.
Gangsters? Are you serious? A man like Mayhew, a great artist, Oh, of course, why not? His reception room was crowded with photographic studies of strange characters. Who were some of these people? Can you name names?
Why, no, Mr. Chameleon.
You're hesitating, Mr. Drake. Mrs. Mayhew, will you come in here, please?
Yes, Mr. Chameleon.
Mr. Drake here tells me that your husband brought home all sorts of derelicts and underworld characters.
Yes, he did. Constantly. The other night, for instance, I found a drunken brute of a man sprawled on my living room sofa.
Who was he, do you know?
Well,
Answer me, Mrs. Mayhew.
Agnes, perhaps you shouldn't answer. I mean by that, Mr. Chameleon, it might be dangerous.
Mr. Drake, I live with danger. It's my constant companion. There are worse things. Shielding a murderer, for instance.
She's not trying to shield anyone, but she's afraid of these people, and rightly so.
Mrs. Mayhew will be given police protection, Mr. Drake. And I warn you not to try and prevent her from answering me. Mrs. Mayhew, who was the drunken man that you found your home?
His name was Benny Blake.
Well, no wonder you were frightened. Benny the goat, huh? Well, your husband certainly had weird friends, Mrs. Mayhew.
You know that man, Mr. Chameleon?
He's a vicious hoodlum, one of the worst. The right-hand man of Louis Marks, a notorious gangster. 3 years ago, almost to the day, Louis Marks disappeared off the face of the earth. Thank you, Mrs. Mayhew. Mr. Drake, I shall be seeing you again. Right now, I think I'll try and locate Benny the goat.
You really think you'll find Benny the goat at Lita's place, Mr. Chameleon?
Well, there's a chance of it, Dave. It's Benny's favorite hangout. It was Louis Marks, too.
Louis is still a sore spot with you, isn't he?
Dave, I'm a cop, and Louis got away. Not from me personally, but from every cop in the country. How he could have vanished as completely as he did. Well, believe me, that's a mystery I hope to solve someday.
Maybe he's dead. As dead as Francis Mayhew. And anyway, Mr. Chameleon, why do you think that gangster Louis Marks could have anything to do with the murder of a famous photographer like Mayhew?
Well, because... Dave, I just thought of something.
Yeah?
What was Louis Marks' outstanding characteristic, aside from his being a vicious criminal?
Well, that's easy. He was the most conceited guy I've ever known.
Exactly. His vanity was fantastic, almost psychopathic. He loved publicity. He loved having his picture taken. The walls of his hotel suite were covered with pictures, all of himself.
What are you driving at, Mr. Chameleon?
I have a queer hunch, Dave. If I'm right, this may be one of the oddest cases I've worked on. Oh, and here's Lita's place. Keep your hand on your gun. We're going in and bring out Benny the goat, who was Louis Marks' right-hand man and a friend of the murdered photographer, Francis Mayhew's.
Mr. Chameleon and the case of the conceited murderer continues in just a moment. When you're suffering from an ordinary headache, neuritic, and neuralgic pain, you want two things. First, you want something that will give you fast relief, and second, you want something that will give you dependable relief. So listen. People everywhere know that because it's actually ready to go to work in 2 seconds, Bayer aspirin provides fast relief. And they know that because it's gentle to the system, it also provides dependable relief. The fact is that Bayer aspirin has been used by millions of normal people without ill effect, a record no other pain reliever can match. And that means that of all pain relievers, Bayer aspirin is one you can take with complete confidence. So when you have a headache, don't experiment with drugs that have not been proved by years of successful use. For the two most important kinds of relief, the fast relief you want and the dependable relief you need, do as millions do. Be sure with Bayer aspirin. When you buy, ask for it by its full name, Bayer aspirin, not just for aspirin alone. Get the 100-tablet bottle and you get Bayer aspirin tablets for less than a penny apiece. And now back to Mr. Chameleon and the case of the conceited murderer. The strange slaying of Francis Mayhew, the famous photographer, involves several people who had good reason to hate him. But Mr. Chameleon is following an odd hunch of his own, and we find him now in the notorious dive known as Lita's place. And he is saying to Lita, the blousy proprietress,
Come on, Lita, quit stalling. I want to see Benny the goat.
How many times do I have to tell you I ain't seen him, Mr. Chameleon? Benny ain't been here for over a week.
You're a liar, Lita. I know he was in here just the other night with Francis Mayhew, the photographer.
Who told you? Mayhew? The cheap punk. Should have known better than to let him hang out here. Those uptown swells give me a pain in the neck.
Well, at least you admit that Mayhew came here.
Sure he did. Such interesting faces, says he. He never forgets a face.
He doesn't, eh? All right, Lita, that's very interesting, but you still haven't told me where I can find Benny the Goat.
I don't know. You're so smart, go out and find him yourself. Hope you have better luck than when you looked for Louis Marks. Louis sure put it all over you cops. Think you'll ever find him?
Someday, Lita.
Someday. Louis's been gone for 3 years.
Listen, Lita, I've had enough talk from you. Where is Benny the Goat? You've got to tell me, or else.
Or else what?
Or else I'll make it so tough for you that you won't be able to operate this joint. I'll close up the place and run you in, too. I've got plenty on you, and you know it.
Why do you want to get hold of Benny? Because he was Louis's right-hand man?
No, Lita. Because Francis Mayhew, the famous photographer, was murdered this afternoon.
Are you kidding?
I don't kid about murder, Lita. Benny was here with Mayhew a few nights ago. You admit that yourself. Now tell me, where is Benny?
Why, I don't know.
You're scared, aren't you? The news of Mayhew's murder hit you hard. Well, you're right to be scared. Now sit and think about it for an hour and then call me at Central Police Headquarters.
But, Mr. Chameleon...
Dave?
Here I am, Mr. Chameleon. Any luck?
Yeah, Lita's scared. She'll come through very soon.
Mr. Chameleon, wait! I have something to say to you.
Oh, I didn't think this soon. What is it, Lita?
Mr. Chameleon, about Benny the Goat. I do know where he is, and I'll tell you. He's... Oh!
Lita! Dave! Someone shot at her from the back of the room. Come on. The place isn't open to customers for an hour or so. It must be someone that she knew. Benny, probably.
That window's open, Mr. Chameleon.
Someone's running down the alley. Stop or I'll shoot!
They got away, Mr. Chameleon. It looked like Benny, all right.
Yes, let's get back to Lita. Then send out an alarm. Benny's not going to slip through our fingers the way Louis Marks did.
Mr. Chameleon.
That's too bad for Lita.
Is Lita dead?
Yes, Dave, she's dead. Second one to die within a few hours. There may be a third.
Mr. Chameleon...
Dave, it's 3 years since Louis Marks disappeared, isn't it?
Well, just about. Why?
Have Mrs. Mayhew, the murdered man's wife, brought down to my office at police headquarters. I want to ask her about the backgrounds of Carl Rich and Martin Drake.
What? But why? I don't get the connection.
You'll understand better when you hear my questions, Dave. I want to find out where they come from and how long Mrs. Mayhew has known them. Thank you for coming to my office so quickly, Mrs. Mayhew. It was quite necessary. We haven't a moment to lose.
What's happened, Mr. Chameleon? Why did you tell me not to bring Mr. Drake?
Because I wanted to see you completely alone. How long have you known Carl Rich, your husband's assistant at his photographic studio?
Carl? About 2.5 years.
Definitely under 3 years?
Yes. Why?
No matter. What do you know of his past?
Why, nothing. He told Francis he'd been a wanderer all his life. He was very much interested in photography, so my husband took him on.
Without references?
References meant nothing to my husband.
I see. About Martin Drake, how long have you known him?
Martin?
Yeah, I know that you're in love with him, Mrs. Mayhew. Nevertheless, do you really know much about him, his family background, etc.?
Well, come to think of it, no. He's a Canadian, he said. He's only been in this country 2 years. I just met him at a party a little over a year ago.
Thank you.
Is that all? Mr. Chameleon, what is this all about?
Mrs. Mayhew, I am not certain of my facts yet, but I may have hit on an amazing answer to the mystery of your husband's murder. You may go now, out this way. And, Mrs. Mayhew, find out more about Martin Drake before you get too serious about him.
You don't think he's guilty of murdering my husband?
I can't answer that yet, but be careful. Good day, Mrs. Mayhew. Dave?
Yes, Mr. Chameleon. What did you find out from her?
That very little is known about either of these men, Martin Drake or Carl Rich.
Mr. Chameleon, you know your theory about this is
Fantastic is the word, Dave. Believe me, no one knows that better than I do. But if I am right... Chameleon. Oh, hello, Detective Foley. What? No, when did you find him? Nonsense, that wasn't suicide. Benny the Goat would never kill himself. Okay, Foley, I'll report to the commissioner.
Benny the Goat is dead, Mr. Chameleon?
Shot through the head, Dave, with his own gun. Murdered by the killer who murdered Mayhew, I'm sure of it. Benny knew too much. He knew who killed Mayhew. Dave?
Yeah?
Contact Carl Rich and Martin Drake. Say I want to see them in Mayhew's studio tomorrow morning. And get the building superintendent to Henry Marble. And Mrs. Mayhew.
What are you going to do with them, Mr. Chameleon?
Well, I shan't be there. At least I shan't be there as Mr. Chameleon.
Oh, you're going in disguise.
Yes. I intend to disguise myself as a police photographer. Brash young man named Harry Lucas. Who knows, Dave? Maybe it takes a photographer to catch another photographer's murderer.
And so, the following morning, we find Mr. Chameleon in his disguise as Harry Lucas, police photographer. His tie is loud, his suit a little too snappy, and his hair has been dyed a fiery red. And he is saying to Detective Sergeant Dave Arnold as they mount the stairs to Mayhew's studio,
Dave, did you mean it when you said that you didn't recognize me?
So help me, Mr. Chameleon, you fooled me plenty. That's important, isn't it?
More important, perhaps, than it's ever been before in my entire career. I'm up against a real killer, and no two ways about it. Sounds as if they were all up here in the studio.
I told them to be here at 10 o'clock.
Okay, Dave, here we go. No more Chameleon.
Good luck as Harry Lucas.
Thanks.
Folks, this is Harry Lucas, the police photographer.
Well, so this is Francis Mayhew's photographic studio, is it? Quite a dump. But then Mayhew must have been quite a guy. Are these the people, Detective Sergeant Arnold?
These are the ones, Harry. Mrs. Mayhew, Mr. Rich, Mr. Drake.
Who's this little character?
I'm Henry Marble, sir, the superintendent of the building.
Oh, yeah. You're going to show me the layout.
What does he mean? What is this, Detective Sergeant Arnold?
Now, take it easy, Mr. Drake. Henry Marble is simply going to show us where he found the body. So Lucas here can take pictures for the police.
But why? Why? And where's Mr. Chameleon?
Yes, it was Mr. Chameleon who sent for us.
Chameleon's busy. Besides, he wanted me to give you folks the once-over.
But why, Mr. Lucas?
Because, Mrs. Mayhew, I am not an artist like your husband, but I am a police photographer.
Well, what's that got to do with it?
Mr. Drake, I got a theory, and Mr. Chameleon agrees with me. That Francis Mayhew was murdered because he was a photographer.
Are you nuts?
Not about this, Mr. Rich. Look, let me show you. Hey, Superintendent.
Henry Marble.
Yeah, Henry Marble. Just where was the body lying? Where was the murdered man's camera?
Right here, sir.
The camera was facing the raised platform where Mayhew's subject sat. So Mayhew was taking a picture when the subject jumped at him and stabbed him.
You're not sure of that, Mr. Lucas?
Almost. That's my theory and Mr. Chameleon's, too. Now, all of you step over there, please.
What for?
You're not going to take our pictures.
Just step over there. Plug on the lights, Detective Sergeant Arnold. The powerful lamps that Mayhew used to take a picture.
Okay. There are the lights.
What is this?
I just want to get a good look at all of you, Mr. Drake. Makes me think of the lineup down at police headquarters. You know, I once photographed Louis Marks, the gangster.
So what?
So plenty, Mr. Rich. Plenty. Louis Marks didn't see me. He was blinded by the lights. I'll never forget him. I'd know him anywhere. I got a sharp, trained eye because I'm a photographer. Just like Mayhew.
That gangster, Louis Marks, disappeared, didn't he?
Yeah, Mr. Drake. 3 years ago. And I've had a theory that he didn't go far, that he stayed right here in this city and assumed a disguise.
A disguise, Mr. Lucas?
Yeah. You have very interesting faces, all of you.
Will you quit looking us over? What has this got to do with Mayhew's murder?
Mr. Drake, the day that Mayhew was killed, he had a 3 o'clock appointment here in the studio with Louis Marks.
What?
Marks is a vain man. He loved having his picture taken. For 3 years, he'd been hiding from the police in disguise. Must have been hard on him. Benny the Goat, his henchman, knew Mayhew, trusted him. He made the appointment, and Mayhew thought it was a huge joke.
And then my husband decided to betray Louis Marks to the police and was killed.
No, Mrs. Mayhew, he simply recognized Marks, that's all. He'd seen him in his disguise, but even when Marks dropped the disguise, Mayhew knew the shape of his face, his nose, just as I do.
Mr. Lucas,
Yeah, Mr. Rich, just as I do. Mayhew stood here, and he studied his subject, and then he exclaimed, "Why, you're the man I've always known." Get down on the floor, everyone. We may have to shoot this out.
Oh, you got me in the shoulder.
Grab him, Dave. Take the gun.
I've got it, Mr. Chameleon.
Well, Louis Marks, alias Henry Marble, Superintendent, at last we've caught up with you.
You dirty cop. I should have known you were Chameleon posing as a police photographer.
But you didn't, Louis. Any more than all the people here knew that my little building superintendent, Henry Marble, was the notorious gangster Louis Marks. Wanted for a half-dozen murders.
You didn't even recognize me, Chameleon?
No, Louis. And I was gambling on the hope that you wouldn't recognize me impersonate a police photographer. The cop and the criminal, both in disguise. Oh, that's a new one. I arrest you for the murder of Francis Mayhew and all the other murders you've committed. Take him away, Dave. The masquerade is ended.
And with these words, Mr. Chameleon concludes tonight's murder case. There's nothing as important as fast relief when you have an ordinary headache, neuritic, or neuralgic pain. And millions who want very fast relief use Bayer aspirin. For Bayer aspirin is ready to go to work almost instantly. Within 2 seconds after you take them, Bayer aspirin tablets start to disintegrate. And that's why relief comes so quickly. Remember this, and remember, too, that Bayer aspirin is one thing you can take with complete confidence. We say this because no other pain reliever can match Bayer aspirin's record of use by millions of normal people without ill effect. So for fast, reliable relief from headache or the pains of neuritis or neuralgia, use genuine Bayer aspirin. And when you buy, ask for it by its full name, Bayer aspirin, never by the name aspirin alone. Get the 100-tablet bottle and you get Bayer aspirin tablets for less than a penny apiece. Listen next Wednesday night at this same time for Mr. Chameleon, the man of many faces, in The Ailing Wife Murder Case. The part of Mr. Chameleon is played by Carl Swenson, with dialogue by Marie Baumer from the original story by Frank and Ann Hummert. Music directed by Victor Arden. Your announcer is Howard Claney.
After years of research, a way to cut down tooth decay has at last been found. Yes, thanks to a remarkable scientific discovery, you now can actually help prevent cavities. What you do is use new ammoniated Dr. Lyon's tooth powder. Based on a formula developed by University of Illinois scientists, it destroys bacteria Lactobacillus acidophilus which cause cavities. Thus, it not only cuts down tooth decay, but pain, worry, and expense as well. The amazing effectiveness of the wonder-working formula on which ammoniated Dr. Lyon's is based is the reason so many dentists are recommending this type dentifrice. So to cut down tooth decay, to have sounder, healthier, handsomer teeth, use ammoniated Dr. Lyon's tooth powder. Both regular Dr. Lyon's tooth powder and new ammoniated Dr. Lyon's are at all drug and toilet goods counters.
Listen for Mr. Chameleon in The Ailing Wife Murder Case next Wednesday night at this time. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.